So today we're going to be mixing up some material 1 and we're going to create an M1 laminate. So what I mean by M1 laminate is something that's going to be hollow and lightweight. So we're going to be brushing the resin into the mold, and then at the back here you can see a little bit of glass reinforcement, so we can keep this piece fairly thin, probably around 3 millimeters to 4 millimeters thick, but nice and strong. So we can cast M1 as well. So here's a casting, but it's solid. So this over a larger size will be quite a bit heavier. So the advantage of doing a laminate is we can do a nice square meter piece, and it would probably weigh around 8 kilos. So here's the mold that we're going to be working into. So this is a silicone mold. M1 and silicone really work well together. We can put the M1 into the silicone mold, no release needed, and you can demold quite nicely. And without using a release agent, it's really quite neat, because if you're painting that laminate afterwards, you're not going to worry about that release agent releasing the paint. So it's a big advantage there. So the process, just in a nutshell, is going to be to mix up some material 1 and then paint a layer of material 1 into the mold and let that become touch dry. And as soon as we finish with that, we're then going to be doing the glass reinforcement. So the glass reinforcement will be this triaxial glass fabric. So this triaxial glass fabric is really neat. If you have a look at the weave here, you can see we've got a weave of 0.90 plus 45 minus 45 on the glass weave. And that, when you use it with the M1 resin, it's going to give us really good torsional stiffness on that panel. So once we've put the M1 face coat into the mold, we're then going to actually do a layer of glass fabric, wet that out with the M1 resin, and then we're going to use some of these 6mm chopped glass and do a layer of the 6mm chopped glass, and then straight over that, one more layer of glass fabric, and that'll be our laminate done. What is quite nice about material 1 is that it is a water-based system, so you can rinse all your equipment out with water. So we have got some water on standby just to rinse out the mixer and the brushes. And it's a very safe product to work with as well. So it's not an epoxy or a polyurethane that is going to have some chemicals that have some toxicity. This is a very low toxicity product, which is great. And also it's flame retardant, so you can't ignite it as well. So very good in that regard. So the mixed ratio of material 1 is 1 part liquid to 2 parts powder, and the natural color is going to be like you see here, just off-white. If you do want to introduce some colors as well, you can do. We've got a range of colors that can be used. So the M1 pigments, M1 liquid pigs, and there's a nice range. And there's a range of fillers that you can put in as well. This piece down here, we actually put M1 iron powder into here to get this kind of aged metal look. So you can create a fairly different look on the material 1. And this little piece over here was M1 with a little bit of bronze put into it to give you a kind of a metal-like finish. Okay, so let's start the process. So one thing with this is try and keep your mold clean. So before I start, I normally leave the mold upside down so I don't get any of the powder into the mold before I start. We don't have to take the whole seal off. We can just put a smaller hole at the top, and that just allows us to dispense the material a little easier. So we will need a scale for this operation. So I have got a nice little 2 kilogram scale here. And we've got some mixing containers. So let's get some product mixed up. So what we're going to be doing in this face coat piece as well, we're also just going to be thickening the M1 a little bit to make it more like a thick paint consistency. The viscosity of the material when you mix it, just as it is quite low viscosity. So if you're going up on the sides of the molds, the material is going to run down the sides and pool at the bottom. So what we're going to do is add some M1 Thixer to it to make it more like a thick paint, so it can actually hold those sloped sides or even vertical sides. So let's get going. Scale is on. This is a great little scale. Measures up to 2 kilograms. Also measures in 0.1 gram increments, so it's nice and accurate. It is good from time to time just to check that your scale is working properly. If it's been dropped or knocked, it can go out of calibration. So just from now and again, just check that your scale is correct. You can always use some milliliters. You can get 10 mils in a syringe and just check that's 10 grams. Or you can get 1 liter of water and check it's 1 kilogram properly, just to make sure that your scale is measuring correctly. So for this face coat, I'm not going to need too much product because the idea of the face coat is to put a thin coating in, probably about 1 millimeter thick. So I'm just going to mix up about 200 grams of resin with 400 grams of powder. So that's our 200 grams of resin. Let's do our 400 grams of powder. Also just important to make sure that your scale is reset back to a 0 figure. You can see this powder splashes around a little bit, so that's why I've turned the mold upside down so I don't get that powder going into the mold. Okay, just about there. There we go, that's our 400 grams of powder. So just to recap, I've got 200 grams of the resin, and I've got 400 grams of the powder. So the trick with material 1 to get a really good result is to use a little shear mixer to blend it. So here we've got a little stainless steel mixer. We have them in 2 sizes. This is a smaller 35 mil diameter, which is nice to mix up about 1 liter of material. But if you are mixing up bigger quantities, we've also got larger mixers that you can use. And this is great to mix up about 10 kilos or 10 liters of product. They're stainless steel, and once we finish mixing, we're just going to rinse these out in water to keep them nice and clean. I think we're ready to go. So we're going to use a bit of the M1 Thixer to thicken, as I mentioned. So let's get these mixed first. So when we're mixing, we're going to add the powder across into the liquid. And we're just going to give that a nice blend. So to get a proper mix here, we do need to increase the shear speed quite a bit. So I'm going to go quite high on the shear speed, just to get rid of all those little lumps and clumps. I'm going to keep the mixer at the bottom of the container while I do this. I'm going to get a little mixing stick and also just make sure that I don't have anything on the sides and bottom of the container as well. That is unmixed. That seems good. And just one more little blend. So once I've mixed the liquid and powder together, we've got about a 15-minute working time with the material one, so it gives us a nice working time. But if you need a longer working time, we also have got M1 retarder. So you can add the M1 retarder into the mix up to a dosage of about 2%, which will extend your working time quite nicely if you're doing larger pieces. Right, so now we're going to add the Thixer. So we add the Thixer to the total weight here. So we did 200 grams and 400 grams, so we've got a total weight of 600 grams here. So 2% of 600 is 12 grams. So we can go to a maximum of 12 grams of our M1 Thixer. So I can measure that 12 grams out nicely here. And as mentioned, this is to just get that viscosity up a little bit for that face coat. So you can see the flowability to start, and as we mix this thick so, you can straight away see how that's thickened up the material one quite a bit. And we're going to give that mixer a rinse in the water. And we're now ready to start with our gel coat layer into the mold. So we can just pour some of the product across. We don't want to put too much in because we want to spread this nice and thin. And this is where you're going to spend quite a bit of time to get the resin into all the detail of your mold. So be careful if you've got fine, intricate detail. We need to stipple this material one to make sure that we don't have any air bubbles in those areas. And we can just brush this into the silicone mold. So there are some little sharp corners here, so I'm just spending a little bit of time just getting the M1 into those little areas. Especially into the corners, we have 90-degree corners as well. It's quite often where you pick up little bubbles. I think we're just about there, covering the surface of the mold. Just some little touch-ups. And I think that's our face coat just about done. That's looking good. And we can just rinse our brush out in water. So one thing that you should also try and do is that I wouldn't go and throw this water away down the drain as it is. Otherwise you can have this M1 collecting in the drains and blocking up your drains. So what I'd suggest is to give your equipment a rinse out and just leave this overnight. And what will happen is the M1 is going to sink down to the bottom of this bucket and it's going to hard pack at the bottom. So what you can do is just pour off the water the following day, and the hard pack that you've got at the bottom of the container, you can then just you can throw away. It's perfectly safe. It's not going to do anything to the environment, so it's all good to just throw in the normal trash. So as our brush rinsed and ready for the next one. So what we need to do now is we need to wait for this first layer that we put in here, this face coat or gel coat layer, to become touch dry. And the reason why we wait for this gel coat to become touch dry is because when we put the fabric in for the reinforcement, this is where we're going to get our strength from this glass reinforcement, is that we're going to have to laminate this down onto the surface. And if this is still wet, we're going to push this fabric through to the face coat of that piece. So we don't really want this pattern, you know, that 090 plus 45 minus 45 glass pattern coming through to the front of that laminate. So that's why we wait for this to harden up quite nicely. So that's going to take probably about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we can start with the glass reinforcement. Okay, so it's been about 30 minutes since we applied this face coat into the silicone mold, and this is what we mixed up, so it's become quite nice and hard. So this has become touch dry, which is now perfect for us to apply the reinforcement layer. At this stage, we don't want to pick up the silicone mold, because if we actually move the silicone mold, the mold's going to flex and it's actually going to break and crack up that gel coat. So an idea is to, if you are doing work with a silicone mold, to have it on a board, because if you do need to move it, you can just pick up the board and move it around if you need to move it around at this stage. So we're now ready to do the reinforcement. So as I mentioned, just to recap on that, we're going to mix up another batch of material 1. We're not going to thicken it. We're going to leave the M1 nice and thin. We're going to wet out the surface first. Then we're going to put a layer of glass fabric down and just make sure that we wet out the glass fabric quite nicely. Then we're going to do a 6mm chopped core and then another layer of our triaxial glass. And that's going to give you a really nice, strong laminate for decorative facades and cladding. So we're going to mix up that batch. So we need to mix up a little bit more this stage than what we'd mix up for the face coat. So for this we're going to do, I think, 300 grams of resin. So the material 1 is safe to use. You don't have to wear gloves. You can just wear gloves to keep your hands clean. So we're going to reset our scale to 0. We're going to do 300 grams of resin. Okay, so it's 299, so that's close enough. And we're going to do the 2 parts powder. So we need 600 grams of powder. .7, that's good. We're going to dump the, so what I've done so we have a bit more working time is I've just pre-cut the glass to size. So you don't want to mix up resins and then have to start cutting glass because you're just going to be eating into your working time. So I've got the glass already pre-cut. And we're going to, and to cut the glass you can just use a nice sharp pair of scissors. So we have these fabric scissors, they've got a little bit of serration to them and you can actually cut this glass fabric quite nice and easily. So we've got our powder measured out and we're just going to add again the powder to the resin. Here's a little shim mixer to give that a good blend. Just going to give the container a scrape like last time. There we go. Just another quick blast. Mixer cleaned. So what we're going to do is pour a bit of the resin across onto the surface, just to wet out that surface. Not too much, just a thin coat. We're going to brush that in. So any little thin spots that you might have had when you applied the gel coat, you can also work over at this stage as well. Okay, so that's the whole surface wet out nicely. I'm going to put our first layer of triaxial glass fabric in. And what we're going to do here is start in the center and work our way out. So while you're doing this, you're trying to get the glass up against the layer of the gel coat without any bubbles to give you all the strength you need in that laminate. And if you need a bit more resin, you can certainly just add a little bit if it's a bit dry. You can work resin rich here. So at this stage, that layer of glass I think is quite nicely wet out with the resin. We're going to use some of this resin now with our chopped glass. I'm going to pour some of our resin across. So it's probably about a 1-to-1 by volume mix. if that's what you're looking at. But you want to keep it flowable, so you don't want it too dry. So let's see what that's like. I'm actually going to do a little bit more. That's looking pretty good. So it's just a thickish consistency. You can put more glass in if you want to, but I think this will actually spread quite nicely across the surface. And we're going to now put this in. We're just going to spread that across the surface. You can also use these glass chips if you have some areas where the glass fabric doesn't drape into properly. You can use these glass fibers into those areas as well beforehand. So by putting this layer of chopped glass in between the two layers of the glass fabric, it just massively increases that laminate strength. Actually, I'm going to add everything across. And if you want to also laminate any fixtures within this piece as well, you can do. So if you've got this piece going to be hanging on a wall and you're going to use a fixture, you can actually put the fixture at this stage and also laminate that into the actual casting or the laminate if you want. So there's our 6mm chopped glass, nicely spread where I need it. And we're just going to finish up now with that second layer of glass fabric. So as mentioned, we're leaving the resin at its normal viscosity. We haven't thickened it at this stage because we want to work this resin into the glass fabric as much as we can. If you thicken up the resin, it's going to be difficult to work into the glass at this stage. And that's our glass reinforcement done. Again, we can just rinse out that brush in some water. And this piece we can demold probably within about 40 minutes. We can leave it for an hour. But yeah, 40 minutes to an hour we can take this piece out. It won't be fully cured at that stage, but it'll be strong enough to handle. But if you leave this overnight, it then will become really strong and rock hard. And this material is also perfectly suitable for interior as well as exterior applications. So we've left this piece now for about 30 to 40 minutes and we're ready to demold it. So let's do that. Right, let's do it this way so we can see properly. We should have the silicone just peeling off this piece quite easily. Here we go. So that's our M1 laminate, and it's fairly light, not a heavy piece. It will just involve a little bit of cleaning up now, so we can just use some scissors to cut around these edges, and we can also use a sanding or a cutting disc just to clean it up quite nicely. Just make sure if you are going to be sanding and finishing this up to just wear a dust mask and some gloves. You don't want to get these fine fragments of powder and glass. You don't want to be breathing it in, getting onto your skin, so just wear some gloves for that. That's your piece. As mentioned, it's perfectly good for interior as well as exterior applications. If it is going to go into an exterior application, or even if it's inside, we have got a product called M1 Sealer. Now this is a water-based sealer, and this is a really good protective coating that you can put onto this to protect it. You can dilute this down with about 20% water, and you can put a couple of coats on and that'll just really seal up that surface. Also makes it a bit easier to clean. So if you get a bit of dust or dirt on it, if you've applied the sealer, you'll then be able to wash that piece quite nicely. And that's our M1 laminate.